big part of that is being prepared to give an answer for the hope that we have. And Dr. Turek is a trained apologist. He's the author of 4 award-winning books. He hosts a weekly television show called I Don't Have Enough Faith to Be an Atheist. He's debated a number of the leading atheists, including Christopher Hitchens. For those of you that have gone through Foundations of Faith, a lot of the things that he's going to be talking about this morning will echo and will add depth and insight to what we've already been learning together. Why don't you guys join me in giving a nice warm welcome to Dr. Turek.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. What I'm going to say this morning is extremely controversial. Whenever you call something I don't have enough faith to be an atheist, it's going to be controversial. So it's absolutely critical that you listen closely, because I don't want you walking out of here thinking I said something I did not say. If you don't listen closely, the results can be disastrous.
Das hier ist ein Mindsektor. Das hier ist das wichtigste Gerät des Küstenwächters. Das Gerät und das Gerät. Überlebensradar.
Hello? This is the German Coast Guard.
We're thinking.
What are you thinking about?
So what are you guys thinking about this morning? You know, I got an email not long ago from a United States Marine. So I knew this man was no sissy. Is that it? Are we done? We out of time? Good deal. I knew this man was no sissy. I was actually in the Navy for 8 years, which, by the way, stands for Never Again Volunteered Yourself. Anyway, this guy was in the Marine Corps, but he wasn't writing me as a tough guy. He was writing me as a distraught father. He said, my daughter was the top Christian student in her Christian high school class. She won several scholarships from Christian organizations to take to college. She could take to any college she wanted to. So she wanted to go to the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill to win the campus for Christ. So we sent her off there, and he said 4 weeks into her first semester, I got a phone call from her. Her words devastated me. She said, Dad, I don't believe in God anymore. I don't believe in God? What? He said, I got in my car, I drove 4 hours down to Chapel Hill that weekend. I sat down with her and I got nowhere. What do you mean you don't believe in God anymore? What happened? And she said, well, we have an atheist professor who teaches the New Testament class. And he said, we don't even know who wrote the Gospels and the Bible has errors in it, so Dad, I'm an atheist. Now question, do you think this young woman in 4 weeks investigated all of the evidence for and against Christianity and made a rational decision that it was false? No, you can't do that in 4 weeks. Not enough time. Well, why would she be so easily willing to chuck what she thought she believed for 18 years? Because she didn't really know why it was true. She just had a feeling. And then she ran into atheistic college professors and she just chucked it all. He says, is there anything I can do about this father? I said, well, have you ever gotten her any apologetics training? That's not saying you're sorry. That comes from 1 Peter 3:15, always ready to give an answer, what Erica just mentioned. Means in Greek, it means not to say you're sorry, it means to give a reason, give evidence that is true. He said, I wanted to, but I never got around to it. Well, you know what? It's actually not all that hard to show that Christianity is true. You only need to answer 4 questions in the affirmative to show that Christianity is true. 4 questions. And if you ask these 4 questions and get evidence to answer that these 4 questions, the answer to these 4 questions is yes, then Christianity is true beyond any reasonable doubt. What are the 4 questions? Here are the 4 questions. Now that's some pretty proven music, isn't it? Now that is actually from our TV show, which is on every Wednesday nights on DirecTV channel 378. How many people have DirecTV? Direct. 3 of us! Come on, friends, don't let friends watch cable. If you want to get out and have enough faith to be an atheist, you got to get DirecTV. Actually, that's not true. You see that website right up there in the corner, crossexamine.org up there? If you go to that website at, well, here it'd be 8 p.m. or midnight. At those times, you can watch the show streaming live. We're also on Roku. You guys know about Roku? Is anyone have Roku? It's kind of like Apple TV, NRV Network, Roku. Also, we're on radio every Saturday mornings. That is podcasted. It's also on our free app, so you can listen to it streaming anytime you want. And what we do is we present evidence for Christianity, and we cross-examine ideas against it. Now, why are these the 4 questions? Truth, God, miracles, and the New Testament. Well, look, if there is no truth, or if it's just true for you but not for me, or all truth is relative, you've probably heard these claims, then obviously the Bible can't be true. Of course, if there is no truth, then any book written by an atheist can't be true either. Right? In a minute, we're going to talk about why truth exists. Next question, does God exist? You can't have a word from God unless there is a God, right? Well, tonight at Sioux Falls First, I'm going to go through some evidence that a spaceless, timeless, immaterial, powerful, moral, personal, intelligent, sustaining creator actually exists. We'll cover that tonight. Third question, are miracles possible? Obviously, the Bible can't be true if miracles are not possible, but I hope to show you tonight, if you can make it there, that there really is a God, and the miracle, the greatest miracle in the Bible, has already occurred, and we have scientific evidence for it. So not only are miracles possible, the greatest miracle in the Bible has already occurred. So lesser miracles are certainly possible as well. Then and only then can we get to the key question, is the New Testament true? The New Testament doesn't have a prayer if there's no truth, no God, or no miracles. But if truth exists, God exists, and miracles are possible, then we can see if we have an accurate, historically reliable account of miracles occurring in the 1st century to a man named Jesus and his apostles, as recorded in the 27 handwritten Greek manuscripts we put under one binding we now call the New Testament. Do these documents here really tell us the truth, or were they written down much later by religious zealots who embellished it and made it up? Because after all, you can't trust religious people, right? That's what they say anyway. Well, tomorrow night at Sioux Falls First, we're going to talk about the evidence that the New Testament documents are actually telling us the truth. Now, some of you are looking at that going, wait, Frank, what about the Old Testament? Believe the Old Testament's true? Well, look, if the New Testament's reliable, you get the Old Testament thrown in. Why? Who's in the New Testament that can authenticate the Old Testament? This is the interactive portion of the program. Jesus, right? If Jesus really, by the way, if you're ever in class and you're not sure what the answer is, just put Jesus down. Okay? Covers everything. If Jesus really is God, as the New Testament documents claim he is, now that's a big if, but if he really is God, whatever God teaches is true. Jesus taught the entire Old Testament as the Word of God, so if the New Testament's reliable, you get the Old Testament thrown in. Now that's the big picture as to why Christianity is true. The book, I Don't Have Enough Faith to Be an Atheist, goes into a lot more detail. We also have a DVD set. There's a new book available called Stealing from God, which, by the way, is not about tithing. The book Stealing from God, the subtitle is Why Atheists Need God to Make Their Case. Whenever atheists are trying to say there is no God, they're actually stealing aspects of God's universe to say he doesn't exist. So that's what that book is about. But I'm about to go through a few slides here, and if you want these slides and more slides that I can't go through here this morning, all you need to do is go to that website, crossexamine.org/CP. That stands for college prep. We do a lot of college prep programs. If you email me, I'm going to email you this PowerPoint presentation I'm about to show you in a PDF format. So just jot that down, send me an email at that website, and I'll send you this, okay? Because I'm going to go through this very quickly, and I want to make sure that if you're interested in it, you can look at it further at your leisure, all right? And by the way, if I time this just right, we'll have absolutely no time for questions. Now, if you guys have a couple of questions at the end, we'll get into that here in just a minute. But we got to start at this issue of does truth exist? You guys ready to go? Yeah. Before we do, let's read something the other day. Made me think about this. Do you realize that There's a purpose for just about everything that we make. Like, for example, this soundboard has a purpose. This gym floor has a purpose. The benches you're sitting on has a purpose. That basketball hoop has a purpose. These speakers have a purpose. But do you have a purpose? If so, what is it? Now, we live in America, right? America is a great place to live. A lot of creature comforts. We live better than 98% of the world, maybe 99% of the world. Yet even though we live in an area that has a lot of comfort, life is still hard, isn't it? Things are still messed up. And every one of us is looking for a way to resolve that discontent we all feel. Some of us are going to try and find it in another person. We want to date somebody, want to go out with somebody, and we think, hey, that's going to make us feel a lot better. That person's going to be my savior, we think. Or we think we're going to do really well in school, go to a great college, and get a great job, and that's going to make me feel content. And we're going to get involved in some cause somewhere, and we're going to say, if we can only do that, that's going to make us content. You know what the real truth of the matter is? No person, no job, no cause, even the best person, the best job, the best cause, is going to make you ultimately feel content. It's all going to come up just a little bit short. And every book you read, every movie you see, every story you hear is a result of a struggle. Every one of us is having a struggle to try and find what the real meaning and contentment to life is. Every one of us is looking for a Savior. You know what Christianity says? There really is an ultimate Savior who, in the end, is going to put all the discontent, all the injustice, all the longing in our hearts right somehow. Somehow, all this messiness we feel, all this discontent we feel, is somehow going to be resolved. The question is that really true, or is it just is it just a hope we have? I think there's evidence that that's really true. What is the evidence? Let's start with the question, does truth exist? And whenever you start talking about truth, you always have to start with Jack Nicholson. Right? Because Tom Cruise had him on the witness stand, and he said to him, Colonel, I want the truth. And Nicholson said, no, he didn't say it that way. If he said it that way, the movie would have gone nowhere. All right, let's try that again. Colonel, I want the truth. Much better. Well, there's a lot of people out there that can't handle the truth. They're saying, you got your truth, I got my truth, there is no truth, all truth is relative, or all religions lead to God. You hear all these things, right? Well, let me ask you a question. If someone were to ever come to you and say there is no truth, you should ask that person a question. What should the question be? Has anyone ever said this to you? There is no truth? What would you say to somebody who says this? Yeah, simply say, hey, is that true? Is it true that there is no truth? Because the claim there is no truth claims to be true. But it can't be true if there is no truth, right? This is known as a self-defeating statement. What's a self-defeating statement? A self-defeating statement is a statement that doesn't meet its own standard. Like if I were to say to you, I can't speak a word in English, what would you say? Hey, didn't you just say that in English? Right? This is a self-defeating statement. Or a self-defeating statement would be to say, my parents had no kids that lived. Right? Or my brother is an only child. Or everything I say is a lie. Some of you will get that tomorrow. Or all generalizations are false. Some of you will never get that. Okay? The point here is the idea that there is no truth, which is what relativists and postmodernists say, is self-defeating. It can't be true. It's like saying I can't speak a word in English. And all I want you to get out of what we're going to talk about here this morning is this one little tactic that in the book we call the Roadrunner tactic. You can get the book to figure out why. But the bottom line here is what you want to do is when you hear these claims is you want to apply the claim to itself. So if somebody says, I can't speak a word in English, you just say that in English. If somebody says, there is no truth, you're going to say, is that true? By the way, if there is no truth, what are you doing in school? What do you go to school for? Supposedly to learn truth, right? Of course there's truth. If you get to college and some college professor says there is no truth, stand up and say, I want my money back. Why am I paying you? It's nonsense to say there is no truth. Now with the Roadrunner tactic, which means you turn a claim on itself, you look like a super genius. How about this? How about somebody says there's no such thing as absolute truth? What would you say to somebody who says this? What are you going to say? Yeah, is that absolutely true? Or if you want to have some fun, you can say, hey, are you absolutely sure? Right? You see, that is an absolute truth claim that says there are no absolute truth claims. It defeats itself. It's like saying I can't speak a word in English. Once again, you look like a super genius. How about this one? You hear this a lot. It's true for you, but not for me. Well, Christianity may be true for you, but Buddhism is true for me. What do you say to that? Apply the claim to itself. This is also self-defeating. It's just a little bit more subtle. If somebody says it's true for you but not for me, say, hey, is that true for everybody? Is true for you but not for me true for everybody? Because if true for you but not for me is true for everybody, then true for you but not for me can't be true because it's true for everybody. Did I say that right? I know that can give you intellectual constipation if you think about it long enough. But that's because it's self-defeating. It's like saying I can't speak a word in English. Actually, there's a more fun way of dealing with this. If somebody says it's true for you but not for me, say, sure, go try that with your bank teller. Yeah, go to your bank teller one day and say, look, I need some extra money. Can you give me $100,000 out of my account? The bank teller says, I'm sorry, I only have $16.04 in your account. Don't worry about it. Simply say, ha, that's true for you but not for me. Give me the 100 grand. You going to get the money? No, if it's true there was only $16.04 in your account, that's true for all people at all times in all places when referring to your account at that time. But let's say you're going a little fast down Highway 29. You just got your license, you're having a good time, you don't realize you're going 90. Right? Cop sees you, pulls you over, he walks up to the car, he knocks on the glass, you put the window down. He says, you were going 90 and it's 65. Very easy to get out of a ticket. You simply look up at him and you go, ha, that's true for you, but not for me. You speed away! Can't give you a ticket if it's not true for you. No, if it's true you were going 90, that's true for all people at all times and all places referring to you at that time. It's just true. By the way, if a cop ever pulls you over and he says, are you aware that the speed limit is 65 miles per hour? You simply say, yeah, but I wasn't planning on staying out that long. Some of you will never get that one, okay? All right, I go to a lot of churches and I normally ask people, do you believe this book is true? And most people will say yes. And then I'll ask them why. You know what answer I get more than any other? Because I have faith. Is that a good answer? Does your faith change whether or not this book is true? Does your faith change whether or not God exists or Jesus rose from the dead? No, your faith doesn't change a thing about those things. You say, well, why is it? Well, think about this. Do you have to believe something to make it true? Do you have to believe in gravity to stay on the ground? Do people who don't believe in gravity float away? Hey, look, there's another one. Hey, if you believe, you'll come back. No, that's not the way it works. You say, well, why is the Bible always talking about faith then? Because there's two kinds of faith. There's belief that, and then there's belief in. Belief that is getting evidence that God exists, that Jesus rose from the dead, that the Bible is true. That's what we mean by apologetics. But all the belief that in the world won't get you rescued from your sins, according to Christian theology. You have to go from belief that to belief in. See, belief that is just intellectual. Belief in is not just intellectual, it's of the heart. Belief that is of the head, belief in is of the head and the heart. James, the half-brother of Jesus who wrote that little book in the New Testament called James, says even the demons believe believe that God exists, but they tremble. Why? They know intellectually better than we do that God exists, but they don't trust in Him. In fact, when I first met my wife about 30 years ago, I got evidence that she would be a good wife, but all the evidence in the world didn't make her my wife. I had to take a step of trust in her to ask her to be my wife. And in a momentary lapse of judgment, she said yes. See, that's the difference between belief that and belief in. Most of the time when the Bible's talking about faith, it's talking about the second kind, belief in. It says, after you know that is true, trust in Jesus. In fact, the word shouldn't be faith. Literally, in the Greek, the word means trust. You're trusting right now these bleachers are going to hold you up. You have belief that they'll hold you up, and then when you sit down, you're trusting in them to hold you up. Everybody deals in faith every day. Now, I had a debate a couple of years ago at the University of Michigan with a atheist. His name is Eddie Tabash, Beverly Hills attorney. Nice guy. We had the opportunity to question one another during the debate. His question to me was this. He said, Frank, my mother was a survivor of the Holocaust. She lived a life full of pain and suffering. Toward the end of her life, somebody gave her the gospel, but she rejected it, and then she died. Is she in hell right now? Wow, that's a tough question, right? So I said, well, Eddie, I don't know where your mother is now. I don't know if she had a deathbed conversion and accepted Christ, but if she didn't, then God is too loving to force her into heaven against her will. You see, the assumption behind the question is that everybody wants to go to heaven. That's not true. Who's in heaven? Jesus is in heaven. There have been people running away from Jesus their entire lives. It would be unloving for God once they die for Him to yank them into His presence for all eternity. And I used an illustration with the University of Michigan audience. I'll use it with you guys here this morning. I'll assume you're the University of Michigan audience. I asked the question of the ladies. Let me ask you ladies in here. Ladies! Have you ever had a young man pursue you whom you did not want to date? Some are going, yeah, he's sitting next to me right now. He will not leave me alone. Every time I ask that question, the ladies giggle and the men look at their shoes. Is she looking at me right now? Well, ladies, suppose this young man continues to ask you out, he keeps asking you out, and you finally get to the point where you say, look, I like you, but only as a... Oh, ladies, why don't you just stick the knife in and turn it? Every young man has heard this. Men, if you ever hear this from a young lady, move on. She's not interested. In fact, a little secret, she doesn't even like you as a friend. Because if she did, she'd be interested. But she's not! She's just trying to be nice. Well, ladies, suppose this doesn't deter this young man. He continues to pursue you, and he gets to the point where he says, look, I love you so much, I'm going to force you to love me. Run, screaming from the building. Can he force you to love him? No. Why are all the ladies in this section? And most of the men. You guys always do this? Most of the men are over here? You do that all the time? Okay. Ladies, can he force you to love him? No. So if he truly did love you, what would he do? Yeah, he would leave you alone. Well, that's exactly what God does for us. God does for us. He sends us cards, letters, and flowers. He sends us creation, which lets us know He exists. He sends us conscience, which lets us know He exists. He sends us Christ. He sends us the Bible. He sends us a radio broadcast, a TV broadcast, a missionary. If you're in a Muslim country and you're a Muslim, He may send you a dream or a vision right now because those are stories coming out of Muslim countries. They're closed to the gospel. If they're seeking God, He'll get the gospel to them. But if you continue after all that to say, no, 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 God, I don't want you, then He will leave you to your own desires. This is what Paul talks about in Romans chapter 1. That He gives us up to our own desires. There's a point where God won't pursue you anymore because He knows you don't want Him. And if He truly did love you, which He does, He'll leave you alone. You say, what's all this hell business then? Well, look. If there is a God, and there is, and if there is an afterlife, and there is, there's only two possible destinations. You're either going to be with God in heaven, or you're going to be separated from God in hell. That's it. Heaven is with God, hell is without God. Now, there's a lot of different ways the Bible describes God, or describes hell, but the actual definition is separation from God. You say, well, what could be so bad about that? You realize that everybody here on earth, whether they're Christians or not, receives some of the grace of God. You receive some of the benefits of God. You experience love, you experience relationships, you experience warmth. His rain falls on the just and the unjust. You have a future, you have hope, you have all these things. But I want you to imagine a place where there's none of that. All the goodness is withdrawn. There is no love. There are no relationships. There is no hope. There is no future. Just stone cold, narcissistic self-absorption. That's hell. You're without any source of goodness. God withdraws himself because you have rejected him. So God pursues you, but like a young man who's rejected a number of times, ultimately gives you up to your own desires. Now, if Christianity is really true, that's true for all people at all times and all places. Now, what about this one? You hear this a lot. There's no truth in anything but science. You go to college, you're going to hear this. What's the problem with this claim? Apply the claim to itself. What are you going to say? Yeah, simply say, hey, is that a scientific truth? Can you go in the laboratory and prove that? No, that's a philosophical claim. You can't prove that in the laboratory. And in fact, you can't do science without philosophy. Science is built on philosophy. In fact, if you go get a PhD, what does the PH stand for? Philosophy. Philosophy of history, philosophy of science, philosophy of biology, philosophy of physics. You can't read the newspaper without philosophy. What is philosophy? It's right thinking about reality. In fact, there's a chapter in the new book, Stealing from God. It's about science. And the title of the chapter is this: Science doesn't say anything scientists do. If there were no human beings, would there be science? No. What do I mean by science doesn't say anything scientists do? You realize that all data needs to be gathered and interpreted? Who does that? Scientists do. Science doesn't do it. In other words, science is done more in the mind than in the lab. And the dispute that we hear between the so-called evolutionists and the creationists or the intelligent design people is not a debate over evidence. You realize everybody's looking at the same evidence? You know what it's a debate over? It's a debate over philosophy. In other words, it's a debate over what causes will we consider possible before we even look at the evidence. The intelligent design people are going to say there's two causes. There's natural causes and intelligent causes. And the evolutionists are going to say, no, there's only one cause, natural causes. They philosophically ruled out intelligent causes before they looked at the evidence. Well, what happens if all the evidence is pointing towards an intelligent cause? Doesn't matter. They've already philosophically ruled that out. So they're always going to say it was a natural cause. Is that a result of the evidence or a result of their philosophical presupposition? That's a result of their philosophical presupposition. The evidence points towards intelligence, but they've already ruled it out because they don't want it to be true. Now, there's more in that book on that, but I just want to point out that you can't do anything without philosophy. Philosophy undergirds everything. How about this? You hear this sometimes. You should doubt everything. This is what the skeptics say. What do you say to somebody who says you should doubt everything? Should I doubt that? You see, why are skeptics skeptical of everything but skepticism? You know, some atheists will say, well, I'm a skeptic. When an atheist says he's a skeptic, he may be skeptical of Christianity, but he's not skeptical of atheism, right? He's not skeptical of materialism. He's not skeptical of evolution. He's not skeptical of all his explanations for how the universe got here. He thinks those are true. You see, everybody has faith or trust in something. The issue here is that what takes the least amount of faith, if you look at the evidence, is Christianity. Atheists have a lot of faith. They have a lot more faith than you have. They have to explain away a lot. Now, how many people in here, and you can be honest here, How many people in here sometimes doubt Christianity is true? If you're not a Christian, you doubt what you believe is true. How many sometimes doubt it? Look, if you don't doubt it, you're probably not thinking very much. I sometimes doubt it. But I realize that when I doubt, most of my doubts are emotional, they're not intellectual. In other words, the evidence for Christianity is quite good. When I'm having a good day, everything's fine. Maybe I'm having a bad day, I'm going, I don't even know if this stuff is true. Then I'm having another good day, everything's fine. Bad day. I don't even know if this stuff is true. Now, has the evidence changed or have I changed? I've changed, right? The evidence is the same. It's me that's going up and down. Emotionally, up and down. In fact, a friend of mine who does seminars like this says, before I have my first cup of coffee in the morning, I'm an atheist. After I have my first cup of coffee in the morning, I'm a Jehovah's Witness. By the time I have my second cup of coffee, I'm back to being a Christian. What's changed? It's not the evidence, he's changed. Who are you going to call? Ghostbusters! What the heck is that? I thought it was one of those Oklahoma earthquakes here in South Dakota all of a sudden. What is going on with that? What is that? Ventilation. Whisper mode, huh? It's the thunder mode. Anyway, if you really start doubting your doubts, then you're back to knowing something for sure. And you ought to doubt your doubts because the evidence for Christianity is quite strong. Now, have you guys ever doubted your doubts? I doubt it. All right, how about this one? You hear this a lot. You ought not judge. If somebody says you ought not judge, what should you say to them? Fly the plane to itself. Huh? Yeah, isn't that a judgment? You see, when people say don't judge, they're judging you. You know that? Now, by the way, did Jesus say don't judge? No. The passage where people try and say Jesus said didn't judge, they don't read the whole thing. It's from Matthew chapter 7. In Matthew in chapter 7, Jesus says this. He says, judge not, lest you be judged. By the same standard you judge others, you be judged by that standard. So before you try and take the speck out of your brother's eye, take the log out of your own eye first, then you'll be better able to help your brother. Is Jesus telling us not to judge here? No, he's telling us to take the speck out of our brother's eye. He's simply saying, get that problem out of your life first so you can better help your brother. So this is not a command not to judge. It is a command on how to judge. In other words, don't judge hypocritically. If you've got that problem, get it out of your life first and then go help your brother. But it would be complete suicide to say don't make judgments. You made 100 judgments just this morning, getting over here. Good choices from bad choices, safe choices from dangerous choices. Everybody makes judgments. Atheists make judgments. What judgments do atheists make? Hey, there's no God. Christianity's wrong. These are all judgments. Everybody makes judgments. The only question is, are your judgments true? I will say this, however, Jesus did save a very stern rebuke for people who were judgmental. And who were the judgmental ones in his day? Pharisees. Who were the Pharisees? They were the religious and political leaders of Israel. They ran Israel. And Jesus went after them. Are you telling me Jesus got involved in politics? Yes, he went after the political leaders. And he wasn't so nice doing it. Have you ever heard somebody say this? Hey, that guy is such a saint. He's never said a bad word about anyone. If that's the definition of a saint, Jesus was no saint. Just read Matthew chapter 23. You guys ever read Matthew chapter 23? Jesus is talking to these scribes and Pharisees. What does he say to them? Woe to you, scribes and Pharisees, you hypocrites! You strain out a gnat and swallow a camel. Oh, you look great on the outside. You're whitewashed tombs, but on the inside, you're full of dead men's bones. You go a mile to make a convert, then once you make them a convert, you make them twice as much a son of hell as you are. How will you avoid being condemned to hell? Sweet and gentle Jesus said this? Yes, Jesus was not Barney. Can't we all just get along, boys and girls? No! He was not Mr. Rogers. Can we say kindness, boys and girls? Well, he was kind most of the time, but he certainly didn't go around saying, this sermon brought to you by the letter M. No, Jesus was tough, and sometimes you need to be tough. You need to say it straight out. In fact, if somebody's doing something wrong and you just won't tell them it's wrong, or you agree with them, you're not helping them, you're enabling them. You're not loving them, you're enabling them. By the way, I noticed one other thing about judging recently. You realize when you compliment somebody, which is a judgment, nobody ever gets upset? Like I would say, Eric, you're a great teacher here. He's going to say, who do you think you are? Are you judging me? All right, that's Luke. Eric's over there. Are you judging me? No, he's not going to say that, right? I notice that people don't have a problem with judgments. They just have a problem with judgments they don't like. See, Augustine put it this way: we love the truth when it enlightens us, we hate the truth when it convicts us. If you tell somebody something that's true and they get mad at you, you have just convicted them with the power of the Holy Spirit. You can compliment them all day, they're not going to get upset. If you tell them the truth about something wrong, they're going to get upset. Everybody makes judgments. The only question is, are your judgments true? Now, there's many more of these self-defeating statements we can talk about, but this roadrunner tactic, the process of turning a claim on itself, is a great way for you to be a lie detector. We don't have time to go through the other ones right now. You can get the book if you want more of these. And this lie detector reminds me of Homer Simpson. Check this out.
Now we're going to run a few tests. This is a simple lie detector. I'll ask you a few yes or no questions, and you just answer truthfully. Do you understand?
Yes.
Can everybody see that's a self-defeating statement, ladies and gentlemen? Okay, good. Here's the truth about truth. Contrary beliefs are possible, but contrary truths are not possible. You can believe everything's true, but everything can't be true. You can believe the earth is flat if you want. It's not going to make it flat. And objective truths can't be denied without being affirmed. Suppose somebody says there are no objective truths. What question should you ask? Use the roadrunner tactic. Apply the claim to itself. Say, is that an objective truth? If they say yes, they've just defeated their claim. If they say no, it's just in me, the subject. In other words, it's just my opinion. You should say, then why should I believe it? It's not really true then. You can't get away from objective truth. Actually, you can get away from it temporarily. What do? You suppress it. Paul says we do this. In Romans chapter 1, we suppress the truth and unrighteousness to go our own way. In fact, here's a question you should ask atheists. This is a question I ask on college campuses when I do this presentation on college campuses. If an atheist comes to the Q&A microphone and gets a little bit hostile, I'll simply stop and I'll say, do you mind if I ask you a question? And I'm going to say, yeah, sure, go ahead. Here's the question. If Christianity were true, would you become a Christian? I've had many atheists yell back, no! No? Wait a minute. You claim to be an atheist, a beacon of reason. Never mind if atheism's true, reason doesn't exist. Why? Because atheists think we're just molecular machines. We're just moist robots. So we're not really reasoning anyway. We're just reacting. Well, let's leave that aside. I asked you if Christianity were true, would you become a Christian? And you say no. How's that reasonable? How's that rational? It's not. They don't want it to be true. You see, most people are not on a truth quest, they're on a happiness quest. And they're going to believe whatever they think is going to make them happy. Here's the problem. You can do a lot of stupid, sinful stuff that will make you happy over the short term, but over the long term, it's going to be a disaster. You know all that discontent we all have? That discontent about relationships, that discontent about maybe a job, that discontent about a cause, that discontent about our family, whatever it is, we think that somehow we're going to resolve all that and everything's going to be great. No, it's not. I've been on this earth for 54 years. I have a great wife, great family, but there's still something missing. The older faculty in here can tell you the same thing. They teach at a great school. It's not perfect. They may have great spouses, great kids, great family life, great home. There's still something missing. And if you go after the idols of this world, you're ultimately going to destroy destroy yourself. So ask the question, if Christianity were true, would you become a Christian? If that person says no or hesitates, the problem isn't here, the problem's here. They don't want it to be true. They don't want there to be a God because they want to be God. They want to do their own thing. In fact, Augustine put it this way, not Augustine, Pascal put it this way. He said, people almost invariably arrive at their beliefs not on the basis of proof, but on the basis of what they find attractive. In other words, a lot of times people believe what they want to believe just because they like the implications of the belief, not because it's really true. By the way, this sword cuts both ways. Are you a Christian just because you like the idea of being a Christian? But you really don't know why it's true? Now, thankfully, you can be right about something and not know why you're right about it. Right? But we got to check ourselves. We got to make sure that what we're believing really is true. And it's not just wishful thinking. Now, tonight, if you come over to Sioux Falls First, it's on 41st Street, is that right, Tom? 41st Street. At 6:30, we're going to talk about does God exist, and then get into are miracles possible. And then tomorrow night, we're going to talk about is the New Testament true. So if you want more on this, you can. In the meantime, the books are available on our website. There's DVDs. There's that website again if you want this PowerPoint presentation. We're on YouTube, Twitter, and Facebook. Like us there, crossexamine.org and Dr. Frank Turek. In fact, we're so into YouTube, Twitter, and Facebook, we've combined these three into one social media platform. We call it UTwitface. Okay? So you may want to sign up for that. We're on radio Saturdays, we're on TV Wednesday night, and the last thing I want to tell you about before we take a couple of questions is please download the free app. The app is free. Cross-Examine, 2 words in the App Store. It's got all of our radio shows on there. It also has a quick answer section. So suppose you're having lunch with somebody, and they say something that's wrong about Christianity, but you're not quite sure how to answer it. You take out your iPhone, your Droid, your Windows phone. You go to the Cross-Examined app, the quick answer section, and chances are there's an answer for the objection they brought up. So as you're having lunch with them and they're talking, you can say, hang on, I'm getting a text. Hey, what about this? Right? So download the app, it's free. Why? Because I don't want to hear about you going off to college and then calling your parents and saying this. Because if you reject the Christian faith, you're adopting another faith, and you got to have a lot more faith for that, because it isn't true. Christianity isn't true. All right, do we have any questions? Questions? We got maybe 5 or 6 minutes for questions. So no one likes to ask the first question. Let's move right on to the second question. Second question, anyone? Anyone have any good jokes, perhaps? So one atom said to another atom, I just lost an electron. And the second atom said, are you sure? And the first atom said, I'm positive. That's my science joke. All right? Questions on anything. Doesn't have to be on truth. It can be on God, miracles, New Testament, whatever. Yes, a question back there. Yeah. Yes, excellent question. How do you have conversations with people without getting them extremely angry at you? Good question. In the app, if you download it, you go to the quick answer section, you'll see truth. Click on truth, it'll say start here. There are questions in there. Here are some questions that you can ask. You only need to remember 3 of them. Well, 4 of them. The first one is if Christianity were true, you become a Christian. Remember that one? Okay. Important question. Suppose somebody says something to you, they say something like, well, do you believe in evolution, let's say. What should your first question be? What do you mean by evolution? Because evolution, the word can mean so many things. If it means change over time, count me in. If it means adaptation within a type, i.e. microevolution, count me in. But if it means molecules to man without intelligence, no, I don't think there's evidence for that. In fact, I think there's evidence against that. The second question, if they say, well, I think evolution is true, the second question you should ask after you ask, what do you mean by that, is, how did you come to that conclusion? Or what evidence do you have for that position? Now, if you go to our website or you go to our Facebook pages, you'll see hundreds of videos. Many of them are Q&A videos on the college campus. And I had this one kid at Wright State University say, do you believe in evolution? I said, what do you mean by evolution? He described it to me, the molecules to man version. I said, no, I don't believe that. I think there's evidence against that. I said, how did you come to that conclusion that macroevolution's true? And he described microevolution to me. I said, that's microevolution, that's not macro. He said, well, I'm just extrapolating that. I said, I know that's the theory, but what evidence do you have of that theory? He said, I don't have any evidence. See, if you press people enough, they really don't have evidence for their position. What they've heard is a slogan, and they think the slogan's true, even though they have no reason to believe it's true. They just think it is. So the first question is, what do you mean by that? The second question is, how did you come to that conclusion? The third question is your opportunity to provide some evidence back. So you can say, have you ever considered that, for example, the evidence against macro, one of the pieces of evidence that atheists or evolutionists give is we have a common genetic code, right? So this must mean a common ancestor. They interpret the common genetic code to mean common ancestor, but what's the other possible interpretation? Anyone? Common creator, common designer. So you might say, have you ever considered that a common genetic code could be evidence for a common designer rather than a common ancestor? I mean, there's a common designer between Microsoft PowerPoint, Microsoft Word, and Microsoft Outlook. They have a common code because they have a common designer, not because they evolved from a common ancestor. All right? So those three questions, what do you mean by that? How have you come to that conclusion? Have you ever considered it? Now, if somebody gets hostile with you, you might say, hey, I'd prefer to just keep this about the evidence. I don't want to get mad, or I don't want you to get mad. I just want to talk about the evidence. Is that okay? I mean, just be very upfront with people. And if people get mad, there's something else going on. It's not just intellectual, it's here. Why? They're convicted. And let me just say something. You guys are old enough for this. The new religion in America is the religion of sex. That's it. If you think about all of the controversies we have in our culture today, are all some way related to sex. Abortion, same-sex marriage, now it's contraception. Now it's you got to pay for my contraceptives in Obamacare, whatever these things are, right? They're all related around sex. That's the new religion. And when people, I've found, on a college campus and online, when people get upset with you for being a Christian, it's political, it's about sex. They don't want you imposing your supposed Puritan morality on people. That's really what it's about. It's not about that whether or not they have this real intellectual objection that God exists or doesn't exist. It's because they don't want him to exist. Because they don't want to be told what they can and can't do sexually. That's the new religion in America. So you just need to be aware of that. Those are the implications. Good question. Anybody else? Yes, ma'am. Do you believe that opinions can be wrong? It's my opinion that yes. Yes, of course opinions can be wrong. Sometimes they're right, sometimes they're wrong. If they correspond to reality, they're right. If they correspond to not reality, then they're wrong. Like I can have the opinion the Earth's flat, right? Obviously, I'm wrong. But if I say it's not round or it's not flat, that it is round, then I'm correct. Yes, sir. The question is, how can we as Christians overcome our own biases? Good question. By studying the evidence. Because the atheist Richard Feynman, who was a physicist, said, the easiest person to fool is yourself. Why? Because we might have a bias one way or the other, right? Everybody has biases, but that doesn't mean you can't be objective. It doesn't mean you can't evaluate the evidence correctly. For example, if you're a doctor, or let's say your parent is a doctor, and you get sick and you go to the doctor, your parent, and you need an operation. Although he's biased, if he's a good doctor, he can do a good operation, right? Same thing is true with Christians. You can be a Christian and still look at the evidence objectively. So you've got to check yourself. You've got to do the research. You've got to always look at the other side with as much grace as possible and see if they really do have a point. Because sometimes they do have a point, right? Yes? Say a little louder, please. Is premarital sex objective or subjective? Meaning, is it objectively right or objectively wrong? According to the scriptures, it's called fornication in the scriptures. You're not going to find the term premarital in there. Yes, because all sexual behavior outside of marriage is a problem. When Jesus used the term sexual immorality, he meant any sex outside of the man-woman marriage is sinful. That included homosexuality, premarital sex, adultery, bestiality, whatever. Some will say, well, Jesus never talked about homosexuality. Sure, he sure did. Anytime he used that phrase, sexual immorality. And you might say, well, why is that? Let me just give you a real practical reason. Other than it deviates from God's intention for ourselves, because marriage is an illustration of our union with God. The culture will tell you that sex is just physical. That's what they're going to tell you. But in our hearts, we know that's not true. Why? Why is it worse if somebody rapes you than if somebody just physically assaults you? Because sex is not just physical. Sex is emotional. Sex is spiritual. Sex is moral. It's biological. Sex encompasses a lot more than just the physical act, and we all know it. If you have sex with somebody, everything changes. In fact, sex is like fire. You put fire in your fireplace, it'll warm you. You get it anywhere else in your house, and it will burn your house down. Premarital sex will work short-term, disaster long-term. I'm just telling you the truth. You know this is true. You know it's not just physical. You know that there are physical things that do go on when you have sex. In fact, there's all sorts of chemicals that are released in your brain that actually cause you to bond with that other individual. And then once that relationship breaks up and you do that again, and then you do that again, and you do that again, it's like tearing a Band-Aid off a wound. Pretty soon it won't stick to anything. That's why people go from relationship to relationship looking for that thing they think's going to save them. And it's not. You can have premarital sex now, and if you keep doing that long enough, pretty soon you're going to destroy your ability to have the union you really want to have with your spouse. So it's an opportunity cost. Yeah, do this now. It means you're going to reduce your capacity to do a real bond later. Yes, sir.
When you say that's just your opinion and that might not be true,
About sex? Well, I think it's objectively true that sex was made for a man and a woman to come together for procreation and bonding. And I think that's what Jesus and the scriptures would say as well. But even without Jesus and the scriptures, there's something known as natural law. And natural law says that the designedness of the man and the woman coming together does something that only a man and a woman can do together. You know, a man and a woman can do everything else alone except procreate. They need one another for procreation. They also need one another for childbearing. Because children turn out best when they have a mother and a father. You don't need the Bible to know that. You can just look at the results and know that. Yes, sir. Are Mac Revolution and Christianity incompatible? Not necessarily. It is incompatible with biblical inerrancy because the Bible says that Adam was created from the dust of the earth. If you want to take that as some kind of allegory, I don't. I think it's true. Then you'd have a problem with biblical inerrancy. But no, Mac Revolution could be true and Christianity could be true, right? Even if we did evolve, that doesn't mean that Jesus didn't come, die, and rise again for the sins of the world. You know, at some point there was a human being who did fall and put sin on all of us. So I don't think that's the case. I think there really was a literal Adam created out of the dust. But there are Christians who claim to be Christians and are Bible-believing Christians, except they allegorize all that kind of thing, and then they say that Christianity is still true. Again, I don't think that's true, but I wouldn't say they're not Christians. Yes? The question is Caitlyn Jenner a woman? a factor in opinion. Caitlyn Jenner is a man biologically. That's a scientific fact. It's ironic there are people out there who are trying to say that they can't control their sexual behavior, but they can control their gender. It's exactly the opposite. You can control your sexual behavior, you can't control your gender. It's biological. I can't alter my genes. They are what they are. Alrighty then. Well, that was fun, huh?